Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange Live.
The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
Starts now.
Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange Live.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
Starts now.
Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
Hey, what's up, people? How's everybody doing?
All right.
Whew. It has been a crazy morning so far. My first message of the day is don't be afraid to pause and reset yourself and really get yourself in a different space. Don't be afraid to start over. I also want to express my condolences to my cousin, Amanda. My uncle passed away, her father. And I found out I think 1 something this morning, didn't realize it, and woke up to the text message and had to rediscover it all over again. So life is short, love who you're supposed to love everybody, but definitely love the people that you're supposed to love, and don't be afraid to live your life. A big lesson that I'm learning in life right now. Just live life to the fullest. So without further ado, myself and this gentleman right here, Mr. Allen, Mr. Allen Gray, we have started this mini-series that I wanted to start just a couple episodes and see how it goes and see how this gentleman likes it, and figure out how we all can work together and support each other and support each other's brains and such. And we did the topic last week. So topic number 2, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, how important is Black representation? That was last week. And this one, nobody wants to be a role model anymore.
Right.
So figuring out how to best attach yourself, and not in a riding a coattail or taking from or just leaning on, but to actually figure out how to gain knowledge. And the whole idea of a role model is more so mentorship. And I've been having this conversation with somebody who I now consider a mentor to me, his named Troy Burton, and figuring that thing out in terms of what happens. Because I'll say I'm 39, and I think Alan's 29, correct?
Yeah.
Something happened in my generation where mentors began to be more resume oriented, meaning they wasn't simply just reaching out. And I'm not saying this across the board, because I know some real good mentors, but that mentor, that one-on-one relationship turned into group organizations and such, and it began to waver to specific populations of people. So across the board, and I don't know if you're comfortable with this, Alan, but these conversations are really from the perspective of Black men. Myself being a Black man, Alan being a Black man, and our perspective. So if this is not your journey, just listen and understand where we may be coming from. And we may differ or similar in opinions. But for me, I felt like literally I had mentors when I was in elementary school, and I physically saw them have to choose their life or their given circumstances or what have you. So I'm not saying I've never had a mentor, but there was a moment where mentors had to choose life, and that's in any situation. But also I saw people beginning to build their resumes or want to help the masses out. So that one-on-one type of mentorship went out the door. And that was unfortunate because I saw a lot of people in my age group that needed it, like myself. You know, my dad died when I was young. I was raised with a single mom for many years until she got remarried. But by that time, I was almost an adult. So the idea of role model or mentorship, which is interchangeable today, really there's a gap. And I see people are getting back to that, but there's been such a gap of missing this. So when you hear older people complain about younger people in their 30s and 20s and teens not knowing how to do certain things or being soft or sensitive, that's what happened, in my opinion. Do you want to give your opening point on that, Mr. Allen?
Um, yeah, I used to hear that a lot where people said that this generation now don't lacks discipline, and you know we're sensitive and emotional. We are outraged by everything, and
Mm-hmm.
just for the just to be 1,000, a lot of role models that we had, I think we talked about this before, a lot of these people chose themselves at a point. Like before, it was,
Yeah.
we're for the youth and we're making sure everybody good. And then, the advent of social media and the internet provided them the device to be able to be successful, to be famous. And I say this all the time that oftentimes the previous generation likes to place blame on our present failings when we're just acting based on the circumstances presented by the last generation.
Right.
The last generation didn't leave those gems and knowledge and tools. They made their mistakes, got right, and said, "Look at these niggas fucking up." When it's like y'all had mentorship back in the day, y'all had people in the streets giving their lives and sacrificing their free time to raise
Mm-hmm.
their kids. Our generation didn't really have that. We had online gurus, we had relationship advice on YouTube and shit, but we didn't have a lot of mentors like that. Not saying we didn't, but it wasn't the village aspect of our community wasn't there for a lot of us. A lot of us really
Right.
fumbled through manhood on our own. So we fumbled, made mistakes, and you know, and certain things that we may have been able to deal with in terms of emotions and processing that through loss and hardship. We didn't have that guidance, unless we had our fathers in our life. You feel what I'm saying? But like we didn't have
Mm-hmm.
that general, hey, the old head up the street, man, he keeping you out of situations. And if they ain't care if it wasn't their family. That was mentality. If you ain't my
Right.
kid, I don't give a fuck. And a lot of us grew up with those circumstances. So nowadays, we're just trying to do what we didn't have. If that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like,
But it is hurtful for. So you're 10 years behind me. The person who I've been talking to is about 20 years above me, and the way he feels about this is now how I'm starting to feel about the teens, because at least there was a representation there for me in the beginning. And it was something that I realized by the time I was a teenager, I was missing. And I began to, by the time I got to college, it was something that I then said to myself, literally, I went back to those mentoring programs and asked them for um, some guidance in terms of starting that. The unfortunate part, many of those organizations that we used to have, like I was in Project Raise, and there was another organization, it's going to jump out of my head, but those were started by individuals that may have been getting their master's or doctorate. So this
yeah,
was a test study, if you will. And a lot of those programs kind of dissipated. They disappeared because that person got a degree and moved on. And that was what I saw. So when I look at your generation, it is really an absence of leadership in the home and in the community, because there started to be this thing, and I started hearing my aunts say it that are really closer to my age, and then I started hearing my first cousin say it. This is my child. Don't XYZ. So the idea of, and that was safety and
right.
trauma being responded, aware that it was being responded to, but at the same time, that made everybody take their hands off of children. That made everybody who was in the village take their hands off. And there's still representation of that, but it's normally for special population, like for women. I see a lot of organizations like that for women. Here in Baltimore, we have like the Baltimore Girls. We have several organizations like that.
Yeah.
But for men, we don't often get that until we're too far gone in any given circumstance to either care to change, to know how to change, to think about changing, to
But
need to change. And then we're
but
put into those situations where we're forced. Go ahead.
I'll agree. And I feel like black boys actually get like the short end of the stick sometimes because
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of abandoned as kids. Like, so say we go through, like, I used to meet a lot of dudes growing up, right? And a lot of legitimately good guys who either in foster care or they grew up in an abusive home. They're angry and violent, but like, these are my
Mm-hmm.
friends. These are good people. And, I hang out with them. I do as much as I can, but like everyone else will look at them and be like, why you hang with that boy? Why you hang with that boy? Like, cause somebody has to show somebody has to. I mean, like, he can't just be treated like a leper, like he's an animal in the street. He's still a
Yeah.
little kid. He wants to play with action figures and play the latest video games, and he wants to see somebody who looks at him and sees potential in him. Like a lot
Mm-hmm.
of us grow up as little boys, and if we don't have a father in our lives or we don't have a family in our lives, no one cares legitimately. And then by the time we want to act like we care, he's in his mid-teens or late teens, and
I
he's
would say even later than that,
right. He's a grown
much
man.
later than that.
Like, and so now when he gets out of jail, and it's like, oh well, you need to heal and trauma. It's like it's 20 years later. Some of this is cemented at this point. Those feelings of abandonment, those feelings of being ostracized, being
Mm-hmm.
an outcast of society solely because you didn't have mentorship. And a lot of people don't want to be role models to kids because they don't care. That's the sad truth. Black
And some of
women,
those people are the parents,
the major
family
thing is the
members.
parents. The major thing is the family. Because a
Mm-hmm.
stranger may show you more attention than your family. A family, oh, you're a boy, you'll be okay. Oh, you're a
Mm-hmm.
boy, you'll be all right. Oh, you're upset. Stop being emotional. It's like, nah, man. Like, he's a kid. He's gonna be emotional. Like
Right.
he 13, 14. He ain't no grown ass man. There's 30-year-olds who are emotional.
Yeah.
But
But I think we said something like that similar last week, and it's really an interesting perspective that you come in. Tamika says, I remember the Yo Baltimore program. It really helped my little brother. He looked forward to going there. Yo Baltimore, the PAL program. Remember, the police department had a after school, a summer Saturday program. The Boy Scouts, the girls. Like, I remember there being more, and a lot of those programs still exist. It's
right.
just they're for special populations now. So it's
Mm,
for the smarter kids. It's for, the kid that's already been in juvenile hall or juvenile detention centers. So it's now, especially for young black men, it's about recovering them or rehabilitating them.
right.
And it's not a gender issue. I'm not trying to create a gender war, but often some of those women programs are there to prevent it. For young men, it's like you got to
It's an
get in
after.
trouble. You got to
Mm,
show that you at rock bottom. And now, people push you out into adulthood like that now. So if you don't show any promise, or if you're not a well-behaved young man, you don't get that. And I
right.
have to be transparent because my behavior was good. My grades were okay, but because my behavior was good, I got to take advantage of a lot of things that a lot of young men like me didn't. Friends that I had in elementary school, because I was well behaved and I had the grades also, I got to go and get scholarships to go to private school. So from middle school on up, it was a private school. So I saw a lot of people who I also went to elementary school who are now still out in the street selling drugs. And I'm not perfect, but I saw that split and what it did to our communities. And it was detrimental when people who who now go and move out to Owens Mills. And now Owens Mills not even far enough. I got to go all the way across the border to Pennsylvania to live.
Right.
And that detaches me from you, because now I got to spend an hour getting home. I don't have time to stop off for a few minutes and talk to this young man. Shout out to, I remember my mentor from Project Raise, Mr. Samuel Sidnor. And I remember life had hit him, and he had some issues, with a child, and he had to step away. But I remember him being there. And he came at a time where, right before my dad had died. And it was very beneficial to have that person. And I'm seeing young men go through that and not have those individuals who even care to step out and to be there and to be represented like that. It's detrimental, and it's hurtful. Because I know, the age range that Tamika's brother is in, that's kind of like either a little bit older than me or about my age.
Right.
So I fear it happening, and it's really just detrimental. That it's awful that I feel like my generation saw the beginnings of this, and now somebody like you, and think about the person that's 19 or 9 that may be overlooked because of the area that they live in, or overlooked because of the
Yeah.
spaces that they occupy. They go to this school, so
Uh,
I'm gonna go over here to this school that's doing well and give my
yeah,
free time and my volunteership.
that's the funny thing. When I only lived in Baltimore as a kid, but I remember I never went to a public school in the city of Baltimore. My mother would purposely take me to Owens Mills to go to elementary school.
Yeah.
So every day we go to, when I go to a public school in Baltimore. But the major thing was, when I go to these public schools, the moment you tell them you're from a certain area, they treat you immediately as if
Different.
you're,
Mhm.
if you're just an angry and you're aggressive. And the major
Yeah.
thing was we weren't anything. We were smart kids. We used to read all the time and this, that, and the third. But and a lot of the kids in our neighborhood, like, that was always the misconception I hated, when people say like you're from a certain area. But the kids are still kids, regardless of the area. You just get used to your area. Like, we just, Westboro, Baltimore, it's not like we were, just 8 years old selling drugs. Like, we
But
still
that's the
play with toys.
assumption. That's the assumption that they have. And I remember when
Yeah,
that started. I mean, I don't remember exactly when it started, because it probably started even before I was alive, because
right.
of racism. But I know the school system began, as I began to be a teaching artist in schools, I realized that's how people were starting to look. And when I began to, and that was very recently, when behavioral issues were too much for me, I
Mhm.
just recently began to experience that, where I'm frustrated. And so I understand how people get to that level of frustration. And then I've seen people tip over that, where they're being disrespectful to children, and they're not respecting boundaries or understanding that
Right.
there's more to that child than just that moment of a behavior. Like, something is coming from that. And I didn't discover that really until the pandemic, where we were teaching like this.
Yeah.
And you would see a young man sitting there holding a baby for the whole class, and he's in elementary school. And there's no mother that comes in and say, "Oh, let me give me that baby," or somebody that takes the baby, like, "Give me that baby. You in school right now." That baby was basically feeding a baby in fourth, fifth, third grade, taking care of, and I
That
this is
level of
not a
stress, that level of
insult to
anger.
parenting. But that's the purpose of a village, and that's what I grew up thinking a village was. But there, I also saw the disconnect when parents start saying, "This is mine. Don't you touch my child." Or I start seeing a rise in neglectful parents or single parents, and that's not a new thing, but it began to be more. The scale started tipping the other way, where most of the children were uh, either being neglected or from single parents, struggling homes, and that's not every Black kid's story.
No.
But it there's some element in that in many stories, because when that child leaves home, who is, you know, I didn't have anybody to go to father-son events, and I went to all-boys school, so that's typically what happens. You
Yeah.
typically have father-sons. I didn't have a lot of people sitting in the stands for me when I played sports, so I stopped playing sports. Ain't nobody coming, so what am I doing this for? Like, I didn't think I wanted that as a career, so the absence of mentorship and that break really, I saw it in my generation. I'm seeing it in your generation. I'm really seeing it in the 20 somethings, 19s, teens. I'm starting
Yeah.
to see that in that where people don't want to touch you if you don't seemingly have any promise or any
Yeah.
like where are you going at in life?
I've
And this is
seen.
again, it's not an attack on mothers or fathers, but something happened
I
and
mean,
it's not a good thing.
because being a role model in general is selfless, and just as time went on, a lot of people just choose themselves. Period. Not
Hmm.
even just their own children; they chose themselves. So they said, I used to self-sacrifice for this. Like, I rapped and I drew comic books, but I can't lie to you. If I didn't have that general support from my household, I probably wouldn't have invested so heavy into it. That's one thing I could be thankful of. That no
Hmm.
matter how hard things was, like my father,
Somebody showed up.
yeah, like if I played my music, like my father helped me sell my first piece of artwork. You know what I mean? Like my dad used to read my comic books and drawing pictures, so like that really pushed me to keep doing it because I had a male figure. Like I can say the one thing that probably saved my life was that I had males around me who supported me, who told me that it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad, and no matter what I was going through. And a lot of my friends did not have that. A lot of my friends would come
Mm,
to my house to get that. Like
yeah.
a lot of my friends came around me for that reason. I always knew that they always wanted that sense of emotional balance. You know what I mean? That where you can feel a certain way. So
Nurturing.
yeah, because a lot of my homies now, like I always tell them 1,000, like I have this big thing where like, bro, if you're going through something, you can talk to me. You can tell me you're sad, you're feeling away. Because a lot of Black boys don't get that level of vulnerability and allowed to be expressed like that. And you need a man for that. You need a male for that, especially in those younger ages. And a lot of us don't. A lot of us are told to man up because a lot of people don't want to
Ah,
take time.
pause there for a second. That is, it used to be a phrase that people used to use. I got mine, and now you got to get yours. Adults used to say that to children. I hated it.
I hate that
But
shit.
that idea of telling a child or somebody who is mentally stunted to man up, it that triggers me. That phrase triggers me. I
That
once
infuriates
I
me, bro.
once worked for this organization, and it was I'm gonna say it. It was called Jewel House, and they had all of these beautiful names for the programs within that. All these jeweled names, diamond and sapphire, all these jeweled pretty names for the women to be inspired. And the organization was really surrounded for or supported by uh, mission was to help prevent subsequent teen pregnancies. So they had one subgroup for the fathers of that one. And it wasn't like Onyx or it was called Man Up. And I was saying to myself, well, if they knew how to do this, they would not be in a teen pregnancy situation. So simply telling them to man up, and they would bring in these, and I would step out the office and go listen to the meetings, and they would bring in these very aggressive men or really, and what I believe, really bitter women to moderate conversations with these fathers. And it was angry. Like you're mad at them for doing this to this young lady. And
When
it
their kids
happened, but it
were
was so like all the programs were so pretty and inspiring. And then when you got to the fathers, one segment that they allocated for the fathers, it was this called Man Up. And I have an issue with that because you're not, that's what mentorship has grown into now. Coaching,
yeah,
life coaching. young people and people that are stunted in their growth, giving
That
them
was
this
my
hard love. You're beating them when you
right.
never first. Beatings and punishments is a result of you not doing what I taught you to do. And what I thought discipline was. But now we're disciplining without even building a foundation for that young person
We're not
to make
learning
a
that
mistake in.
person. We're not learning that particular person before we decide to beat into them instructions, and that's the bigger
Hmm.
problem. Like
Right.
every dude's different, and then, like you said with the teen pregnancy, what kind of baffled me was they're both kids. Like if we're talking about teen pregnancies, we're talking about one kid who
Right.
impregnated another kid. It's
Hmm.
like they're both children. Like you can't tell someone to man up. They're not a man yet.
Right.
They're a kid. Like
But that's how people look at us.
that's how they approach us when the moment we turn 14 to 15, there's no teen. You're treated as a grown ass man. And I hear people say that all the time. Like, oh, because when I was
Right.
14, I'm like 5'11". So immediately I'm treated as a man. I was fighting grown ass men. I was having beef with grown ass men. No one said, yo, he a kid, bro. No, he a grown ass man. And then
Do you
it's like,
remember? Do you remember, or was this a thing when you were young? An age majority card. So it was basically an ID for like teens, basically. So before you could get like a regular ID at 18 or whatever, you had to get a age majority card. Now I remember going to a majority white. It was probably like 95% white high school. I was the only one. It was a couple other black kids that had one, but none of the white kids had one. And one of the purposes for that card was if you were ever stopped by the police, which we were often stopped, it was to show them I'm a kid. I'm not an adult. This is my
yeah,
information. If they got to drive me back home or if I'm somewhere I'm not supposed to be, it's to show them immediately I'm a kid. Because I couldn't think of any other reason to have that. And then when I was asking people about it, that was what it was for. If you had a child that, like, I started getting facial hair in 5th grade. So if you started looking more mature or sounding more mature than what you are, you needed this to show a adult or police officer really, I'm a child. And again, I'm not saying it would make a difference in today's world because it wouldn't, because you can clearly look at some of these kids that Trayvon Martins of the world and say, hey, this is a young child. It's not an adult. But that was a thing. But that's how people look at us, especially as black men, and also our young ladies sometimes, because if they start developing faster, but they look at us as men, thugs, hooligans, at very young ages. I
yeah.
remember the first time I was stopped was in middle school, right downtown. I went to school in Mount Vernon, and I was stopped, and that's why my mother got me an age majority card. And I think I was like 14, I believe, or probably younger than that when I got that card.
I'm gonna stop. I got stopped by police one time in Georgia. I came out to see my father, and they was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yo, we had these two kids break into a house, and they had
Mm-hmm.
braids." Now, I've never had braids a day in my life, never in my life. So when they stopped and said, "Oh, my friend had braids," but if you seen us and how we look, you like, yeah, they had braids and white t-shirts. That was the stuff. Everyone had a white.
Right.
When they came to stop us,
Mm-hmm.
everybody on that street had white t-shirts, but it was two light-skinned boys, a girl, and then us. So he stopped us. I had an afro at the time. I ain't had braids. My
Mm-hmm.
man had braids, but we were literally leaving my crib because we were just playing video games.
Mm-hmm.
Stopped like we some damn criminals, but literally we were just playing video games. We were just playing video games for like 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and they're asking us all these questions and shit like that. And it was one of those times where I realized that I could have explained to y'all everything. Y'all could have heard how well I spoke. Y'all could have heard the fact that I'm a kid, regardless of my voice or anything else. Y'all automatically have this assumption that I'm a grown ass man.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment you saw my black body, I immediately turned into a grown adult.
Yeah.
It didn't matter about my experiences or anything else. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's crazy is it's not just white people that look at us like that. It's our own community that looks at us like that.
Yeah.
young. Like I never forget this one time. I was having a conversation with somebody, and I moved to Georgia, and I was like, "Yo, he heard my, because where we from, we got slang and shit like that. I always sounded like I was from Maryland, even though I lived in Charlotte a lot longer. But that was always how we talk. You know what I mean? Just whatever. So when I asked the dude to take me home, and he take me to the crib, the first thing he's like, "Man, I thought you were gonna live in the projects or something." And I'm like, "Why the fuck would I live in the projects, bro?"
It's the assumption. It's the assumption.
What killed me about Buddy was like, "Bro, I made better grades than you. Why did I have to live in the projects?"
But it's the assumption of it.
It's just the moment you
Especially
saw
if
me.
you find yourself in a well-to-do area, oh, they must have gotten a leg up. They must have gotten, and if we did, so what? Do we not deserve it, or are we not deserving of it? But that's
Black boys' individual circumstances are never taken into account when they initially see one. That's why when a lot of young boys needed, instead of getting yelled at and barked at, that doesn't work a lot of the time. Like we had this guy on middle school. His name was Mr. Cunningham. Every kid in my middle school, when I was in Charlotte, we loved Mr. Cunningham because Mr. Cunningham, he never did that. Like all the black male figures in that school, I'll say this: when it came to us acting crazy, they will pull you to the side and talk to these. I mean, one dude brought a gun to school. He was gonna air shit out because these dudes that jumped him. Mr. Cunningham stopped him, pulled him in the office, and was like, "What are you doing, dog? Man, these dudes jumped me just to hey." No, bro. He ain't expel him. He ain't do nothing. You could have got that. You could have fucked his life up for real. Buddy was cool. He never did no shit like that again. He was a cool guy. Just he was getting bullied. But instead of you saying, "Oh, you're a criminal," this, that, third, like, look, he's getting bullied. He don't feel safe. He feels like he's under pressure. Like he's going through real emotions. Like instead of he treated his emotions emotionally. He met him there where he could then think logically. But if we just attack him, oh,
but that's to that point. That's one of the things that I was thinking about when we were going through these topics. Most of the situations where you had somebody running into a school is because they were being bullied, and nobody was intervening. Nobody was stepping in. If it was a young boy, he'll toughen it. It's toughening them up. It's tough, and it's that idea, and that was never really said to me, but it was by at home or with family. But I know the air of that was what it was because I was given as restricted as I think my childhood was. One, because of my behavior and my grades and the fact that I was already going to school by myself by the time I was in 4th or 5th grade. It's just an assumption that's a boy. He go learn. He got, and it was a lot of moments where I think I needed the guidance or I needed someone to question me because I didn't feel comfortable just saying or telling I went through something. But we have to begin to bring that situation, whether it's you with your nephews or your nieces or because those relationships, like with Mr. Cunningham, typically that stopped when the school bell, end of the day school bell rang. And you didn't have that on your way home or while you were home or when you were living life as you got older. Those people did not, matriculate. I've tried to find Mr. Sidnor, but I've never been able to, I just wanted to find him to say thank you because I know that moment in my life having someone who understood a little bit about where I was coming from, it made a difference. I wish I would have had that ongoing, but for me, it was always women in those roles. And that can sometimes come off as a little angry or a little bitter, or they treat you a certain way,
due to their past experiences with other dudes versus seeing it from the perspective of knowing why you made those mistakes. And you feel what I'm saying?
And I had a young lady today. She posted on her Facebook page. She directed it towards women only, and she asked them, how do you treat men in your everyday life that may not have been a person that caused you problems or not, but how do you treat the rest of the men in your life? And that's a question that I think comes up, because a lot of us, we were born, there were women that, like, there were men in my family, but they were away at college
Mm,
or just in and out and never really consistent. So you are then raised by women who have had bad experience with those women and have had to choose to do it on their own. And that is the moment where you bring mentorship and find ways or individuals that are positive influences on your
right.
children. Not simply men that you want to be with, but make sure that those men are well-rounded, well-cultured individuals. And I'm thankful for the representation that I had. But again, a lot of those ended when the school bell rung.
Yeah.
And once I got to middle school and high school, there was no black faces. I think in middle school we had two, and they wasn't even there at the same time. In high school, I literally went to Archbishop Curley. These men were friars with the black robes and Jesus sandals and the ropes around their waists, and then the rest of them were white women. So that representation was very jarring,
Right.
for somebody wasn't even Catholic. So it says a lot about where we are right now, when that's the representation that we have. And I've had some white men or men from other races be very beneficial in my life.
Yeah.
My middle
Yeah,
school
a good
principal,
person, a good
Mr.
person.
Sindler. I've had those individuals. I've had other black men, but again, if they change jobs, that was it. So that's
Right.
where it stopped. So for you, what has been your experience with mentorship or
Um,
role models, as I phrased it on the topic?
um, again, I think I was blessed to have um a good amount of strong black males in my life that really instill values. Like I told you about Mr. Cunningham.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember all these guys by name. That's how I let you know the positive. Mr. Cunningham was cool as hell. Joe, we had a health teacher named Mr. Clark, and
Mm,
again, he was super super honest about keeping in shape. You get to talking crazy to a woman. Hey, watch that shit. We don't do that here. We do like
right.
certain things he did was always in love. Like, hey man, come on, man. We working out, keeping in boys about keeping in shape. If you was a troublemaker, like we have dudes in there who'll pull you to the side and talk to you. When I got to high school, I ain't gonna hold you. I was fucking in high school, but one dude I knew in high school, it was my art teacher named Mr. Johnson, and because
Mm-hmm.
I was really into drawing, but that was the first time I had someone really push me art wise, and he changed my
Mm,
life. I'm not gonna lie to you, that changed my life being pushed artistically. Like, nah, you can do better than that, huh?
right.
Most niggas be like, oh, you're just dope, but he pushed me. He pushed me, do better than that, do better than that, or I'd get angry and stuff like that. Like, you're better than that, bro. Like you're way better than that. Like you're too smart for that. Never.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're just like you're too smart for that. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're all right, man. He'll be all right. And you can talk to him. You'll hear him out. He'll listen. And of course, I had my dad. You know what I mean. So even my stepfather. Like I had a stepfather that wasn't shit. But I had salute to him. He's from Baltimore too. My stepfather Walt.
Mm-hmm.
He I got mad one day because the dude tried me in school. I wanted to fight, and I came home. I'm like, man, I wanted to punch him in his face, man, but he got all these guys around him. He's like, yo, so you who you got to prove that to? You ever punched someone in the face before? I'm like, yeah, he's fighting stuff. All right, then. So if you do that, who you proving it to? Him or you?
Mm.
Like who you trying to show that to? If you ain't no punk, let him think you a punk. What that got to do with you? And
Now, and some of those lessons, and I'm gonna be the first one to say, um, they don't always prevent you from making mistakes, but it becomes like a little tap on your shoulder when you're in those spaces. So
yeah,
now you have options, because nobody can really tell you what to do unless
yeah.
they are like beating you into you. But beyond it, even once they are separated from you, you still will make choices on your own.
but,
So
but
for
but
me,
having that
right,
on my shoulder, like having that in the back of my mind, always
right,
who are you proving this to? Who are you
hmm
proving this to? Like, yeah, you still get mad if someone say something, but it was more so like unless I legitimately feel threatened, unless you're legitimately threatening my safety,
Right.
I have nothing to prove to you. You can think I'm
Mm-hmm.
the biggest coward. Cool, bro. Until you threaten my safety, I don't have to resort to violence. That's not my first response to things. That doesn't have to be, because who am I proving that to?
You have
That
options now.
if I didn't hear that and I still felt I needed to prove something, I still felt like I had to show somebody, like I had to show you this and I had to do that. A lot of us needed that. A lot of us needed that. Some of my friends are dead. Like some of my friends are in jail, and these are like brothers to me. But
Mm-hmm.
no one told them that you don't have to go out like that, bro. It's okay to say nah, or when someone asks you to do something, it's okay to say I'm not comfortable with that. A lot of us were
I
told, "Nah,
would I
man
would
up,
say
man."
to you, and you have children.
Hmm.
One of the things that has made the difference for me in being a teacher and just being around people in general and learning how to communicate is learning how to determine someone's learning style.
Yeah,
Because a lot, and I don't know the percentages, but in my opinion, and just in teaching, especially with young black boys are either visual learners or hands-on learners, or they're pushed to be those things. So a lot of us listen or hear or watch you do things. And depending on what my learning style is, I'm watching. Most times, I'm a visual learner. I can see you do something, and the information is then downloaded in my brain.
right.
But a lot of what we're seeing is, and what I've noticed in being in a lot of public schools or just schools in general, and around children, children learn by what they see you do. You can say whatever you want to say, but if you're not setting a good model for them, they're picking up on that. And children typically go to the extremes. So they
Yeah,
either hear what you say and really adapt it and really take it literally and don't adjust it to who they are, or they go the opposite way and they want to be anything but that. They want to be anything, and that's the ones where we were talking about last week, where people move away and they misrepresent themselves because they're afraid or they're ashamed of who they are and where they come from. And now the idea of having a role model is, even for me at 39, for you at 29, it's still an important thing because I'm an artist. So
yeah,
as I grow as an artist, I need people around me who have done this, who have been there, not just succeeded, but have been there and done this accurately and know the process. And not that I'm just trying to cheat off that paper, but I just need examples of what greatness is around me now. And not just, I just want a team of people, but even as an artist, you're forever learning. I'm an actor, I'm a visual artist, I'm a teacher. So you're always in a constant state of learning something new. It's just, I think, naturally for artists, you just want to learn something else that you saw another type of artist do or
yeah.
another technique. So you're always learning. And that doesn't go away or disappear just because you was never given a strong foundation, or even if your foundation a little rocky, it doesn't go away, or you're not exempt from that, but it still happens. So putting the right people around not only your children, but now as adults, putting the right people around you makes all of the difference.
It
It
makes it
just
work. Yeah.
and I don't know how, but I don't know how to get us back there or how to convince elders to try harder to get through
Um,
the kids.
I know the major thing is part of the blame for the influence for Black boys is a lot of the representation and the role models we have
Hmm.
themselves are problematic.
Say that
The
again.
a lot of the Black role models that get pushed to us, excuse me, not that we have, because there are a lot of positive Black role models that are out, but we have to
Hmm.
look and find them. The ones that are the most available to us, that we see a lot of these rappers, a lot of these media personalities, they themselves are problematic. Um, so we don't have, like, when Kevin Samuels was getting popular, I had a lot of people talking about how, oh, he makes a lot of great points and he makes a lot of points in that. And it's not about the points being made, it's about the person. It's about the energy of that person,
The
the anger,
intention.
Yeah, the anger, the vitriol, the disrespect, the blatant, when someone challenges you, you immediately get to being emotional and insulting. And we're hearing that, and that's validating a certain type of behavior amongst boys. That was validating a certain level of thought process towards certain people among boys, the value things that have nothing to do with your character, nothing to do with how you treat people, nothing to do with having morals and values, more so of having
Right.
these intangibles to validate yourself versus you going inside and working on the things that you need to work on to be the
Mm-hmm.
best you. Or people coming to him for advice and you're being told, it's your weight or it's how you look, or you're a 5, you're a 4. And some people are coming to you for legitimate advice because they legitimately want someone to help them. And instead of you
Yeah.
being empathetic, because we think, oh, you're being harsh and real, you're being an asshole. And a lot of people were validated in being an asshole, respectfully, because they thought that, well, if you're telling the truth is all that matters, when that's not all that matters. It's that empathy matters. That empathy, especially for us as men, because we don't even show that to each other. So when we
But that's
have
the starter kit for being a man. Like, you
not
have to
caring,
deliver your knowledge as a weapon and beat people over the head with it versus simply talk. I scroll through Instagram and I'm learning how to eat to live right now because we've been tricked to believe that fasting is good. Just put it in the microwave or put some water to it and mix it up. And we've been trained to think that that's great. But I have people online, if I bring them on the show or if I'm talking to them, they're yelling and they're angry at the information that they've been given to give to others. And they're
right,
punching you in your face with it or making you feel less than for not knowing or being
right,
stuck in a cycle. The way we eat is attached to our emotions as Black people. What do we do after a funeral? We go eat. What do we do after a wedding? We go eat. What do we do when we find out somebody died? We bring them food. Like, so it's attached to how, so we have to relearn things. But yelling at people, and that's why I was so uh even now, like since we've been talking, I'll go past your page and I'll see you talking. And it's just the way you deliver a message. Like, you're knowledgeable, and I can tell you're learning from what you're saying, and you're learning in the process of it, but you're not beating people over the head with it. And truth can be hurtful.
yeah,
And I learned how to, from the people who I watched, in terms of educators or artists or leaders, I watched them give truth in a very disrespectful manner, and I've had to adjust how I give the truth. I still am very honest, but now, like you said, the empathy. Where's the empathy at?
and that's
Had you
the.
forgotten that you were there before?
You said what? I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, like, because I think often we forget that we've been there before, or
Yeah,
we've experienced that learning of level of learning something.
I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you. Like, I used to be pretty cold to people, completely. Like, I had empathy, something that I just learned that I want to move in kindness. I believe in
Mhm,
righteousness, and Yoruba. That's the biggest thing, is you move in righteousness, and that takes you to the higher plane. And
mhm.
righteousness means you care. So when
Right.
I'm talking to people, like, I notice a lot of the times when I wanted to tell the truth to people, wasn't because I wanted to show how much smarter I am than you. I cared. Like, I literally cared about giving you as much information about something that I
Mhm,
know, because it may help you. You know what I mean? Like, some people, like, I have a lot of friends who are Black nerds, but they don't feel they have a lot of representation in that medium, so they run away from it. And I cared enough, so I said, "Nah, we have this, we have that, we have this, we have that." But if I beat you over the head with it, you're gonna take it like I'm downing you for not knowing. When it's like, bro, if you didn't know, you didn't know. But I'm telling you now, because now that you know, go look it up.
mhm.
I mean, but
The it's the low vibrational scenarios for me.
yeah,
Like, it's
it's
Yeah.
super low vibrational to me. Like to me, like the moment you learn something new and you want to go to some other black people that don't know it and you want to show your superiority to these black people,
But it
I
becomes a weapon and not a tool at that point.
and it disgusts me. Like
Hmm.
whether it was a lot of the conscious community would learn something, especially the black men, and you would beat this ideal of what a black man should be to other black men. When some of these people are already good people, they just don't have the knowledge or
Hmm.
the alternative so they can still be a strong and sturdy man without being hateful and xenophobic and feel that they have to have hatred in their heart and this bitterness towards them being lost. And then when they learn something, they take on an anger of how come I didn't know, and they throw it at people who don't know still. And it's this
Yeah.
cycle of some people are turned away from knowledge just because you're making them feel lesser than for not knowing. So they're like, man, I ain't mess with that
Yeah.
conscious shit.
And
When it
I've
shouldn't be like
seen
that.
that happen in a lot of different scenarios. Being
Yeah.
in school settings and being in art settings and community type of settings, I've seen that happen to me. And I remember I had to go off on a teacher one time, and she couldn't fathom that I didn't have a concept of this one thing she was teaching me. And I just said, "Bitch, I don't know that." And I felt bad at my response,
Right.
but I was frustrated because it took her 60 plus years to learn that. She had
Right.
those 60 plus years to learn that. And she's talking to this 22-year-old and judging the fact that my parents, I was learning, my family didn't go to church often. We went, but not regularly.
Right.
And so I didn't learn hymns that way. Like if it was like something that you just know, I knew it. But I didn't know the hymns. And she was saying to me, "You don't know this? Like, why don't you know
Right.
this?" And I was like, I kept trying to explain. I said, well, I went to different types of churches. And really, because the bulk of my education was in a Catholic school, I learned things their way because we had to go to, mass and stuff like that every
Oh no,
day.
I used to go to Catholic church when I was younger. I know. Like it's
But
different
school
than
is a whole nother animal because you're getting that on a daily basis and the school system of it all. But I
yeah.
was trying to say that to her in a way where I'm not embarrassing myself in front of all these other black people and somebody who I was looking at as a mentor to me, and she embarrassed me. And I was like, I just went off. And I profusely apologized like several times to her, but it was the idea of her, and that's a gap in mentorship. And a lot of the people who I thought and I had lined up for myself as mentors then began to compete with me. Once I became an adult, I felt like they were competing with me and not like, "Hey, Nate, this is how you're doing it now." And I just spoke about the gentleman Troy Burton and my friend Tracy. I'm just now being put in a space where somebody say, "Hey, Nate, hold on, let me just share this with you." And
Right.
and you can tell the difference between when someone is bringing you a tool and when someone is bringing you a weapon, and it
Like,
feels different. I don't feel like you have to talk to people in that way, but because black people are seen as we can take it, we can bear it, we don't hurt, we don't have pain. That's how and now, like you said, that's now how we talking to each other. That's
yeah,
not even how white people talking to us. That's how we're talking to ourselves now.
we call somebody soft or you're crying too much when it's like if they never dealt with that trauma and sometimes we downplay people's traumas because in this hyper it's not
Hmm.
this hyper traumatic experience. Some people as simple as them losing their house. Some people, their mother and father split up and they
Hmm.
lost that mentorship. They lost that person who hears them emotionally from their dad or their mom, and that fucked them up.
Right.
Like that, they could have really damaged them. But we all be like, oh man, well, I'm in the streets, and on that, we give empathy to certain hardships in our community. For
Hmm.
when it comes to black boys, like, hey, oh, you in the gang, you in the streets, you get all the crocodile tears and all the sympathy. But if
Yeah.
you just struggled, if your parents lost their job, if you just like, I used to hear this in school all the time. A dude be like, "Oh man, you don't know nothing about this, then, and third." And I was like, "Dog, when I was in Baltimore, our water used to turn brown, and we had to wash in the sink." because
Mhm.
the water would turn brown. Like, it's lead. We had rats in our house. Like, I'm not airing it out. Like, we cleaned our crib, but it was a 1950 row house. You know how them Johns was. Like,
Mhm.
it wasn't the best. We had a
Right.
floor heater where all my toys would drop in. Well, imagine playing with your Legos and they get set on fire because you dropped them one day. We didn't have air conditioning in the time we moved to North Carolina, like central
Mhm.
heating. But these same people who had parents who provided for them, who did everything for them, and you made a conscious decision to go against what they told you, there's more sympathy for you than for people. And we like lost I can count on both hands how many times me and my sister lost everything.
Mhm.
But
And
there's
then just
no
start all over again.
life. Had to meet new people again from losing everything. It happened when we was teenagers. But there's no sympathy for it. It's like, oh man, up, get over it. I'm still angry about that shit.
Because that's traumatizing. I've seen that happen to people, and it makes you not have attachment to anything. And that's a hard thing to relearn because you feel like starting over is just let me just walk out this house with what I got on my back, and that's a very traumatizing thing because what if you then taught that to your children, not to have an attachment to anything? That's a real ruthless. That's the signs of ruthlessness. Like if you continue doing that, and I think many of us. So for me, I grew up in a single parent home. I had a stepdad eventually, and I had a biological dad that wasn't there. I was raised by women, so I have a certain viewpoint. But I always had a roof over my head. It was
Right.
climate controlled, or I ate every night. It was never a thing where it wasn't enough food to eat. So my expectation for life, and that's a word, if the more you talk to me, the more you'll realize it's certain trigger words. Expectations are horrible for me because
Right.
either as adult, either I forgot. So my expectation is based off of what I desire or what I have put before in terms of my values. And we sometimes forget that, and I can hear the way you explain things sometimes where it looks like you're growing from that. Like, so if you had a certain nucleus, even though it may have been, up and down, I can hear you growing from the things that you're talking about. And that's a hard thing to see in people sometimes because sometimes they just forget because I've gotten to this point on my own. I don't need you. And hearing that from you, I know people like that who have no attachment to people, places, or things. And it's very hard being in a relationship with them because they don't have an attachment for anything.
Like, I'll be
And then you have the
1,000.
opposite where, you may just have been spoiled. So you don't have any
Right.
sympathy or empathy. To hell with empathy. You don't have sympathy for people
You
or
don't care.
compassion in general. Like not realizing that could have possibly, and I don't know if that was a trigger or a trauma for you, but that sounds like it could have been traumatic. Like you never know, oh, is this today? Or what's about to happen today? Or,
Like,
I can only
like
imagine.
I think it's a few times like, I've come home one day and then you learn right here, your life's over. It had nothing to do with you. I didn't make a decision. It had nothing to do with me. It's my parents. It came
Yeah.
home one day, my life's over. And 9 years of my life is just gone. And
Mm.
then I'm literally trying to piece my life back together. For me and my sister trying to piece our life together for 9 years. So by the time I'm 25, from 19 to 25, I was kind of stuck at 19. I'm trying to be an adult. I'm trying to move forward, but it's this lack of, I don't care about anything. And
Was
then,
attachment an issue? Was that one of the issues or the side effects?
well, I say the biggest thing for me was caring. Like I didn't like,
Mm.
even to this day, I don't care about people to an extent. Like it's a struggle. I have to remind myself that everybody's. Like my brother said something when I was younger. He said circumstances don't make life situations. I can't judge nobody based on their circumstance because I don't know what you've been through. I've met people in
Mm.
the burbs who were in abusive households who like they're at my house just because they daddy be whooping their ass and they just
Mm.
don't want to be at home no more. And I never wanted to, no matter what I went through, I never wanted to be heartless because I felt like being heartless is really weak. not caring makes you weak. Not showing empathy makes you weak because you're deciding to turn it off. And it's like this fight with myself to like, I'm gonna care. I don't want to be that person that doesn't care because it's easy to not care. It's easy for me not to care. It's easy. Like, it's nothing. But to me, it's the stronger decision to be more empathetic to another brother.
I wouldn't say easy. It became normal for you not to care.
Yeah, right. It became more of a normal response where I just don't want to be a person that doesn't care about other people, especially when it comes to me seeing another man and immediately turning into man up versus, damn, that's fucked up, man. I know something probably
And
going.
listening, like hearing them.
Like I've had dudes who honestly they'll be in a rage and they'll be angry, and I'll talk to them during defense mode until they realize I'm not attacking them. And then once they realize I'm not attacking them, whatever problem that was there, it's immediately mitigated because I came with understanding versus anger. When it, again, my normal response would have just been anger, like just immediately like I have no patience for this. But that's why I try to do that, because I know that's what I needed. I needed somebody to care. Do
you notice when you're talking to some of those types of men and you're trying to reassure them, hey, I'm just a shoulder. If you want to talk, how many times are you having to say that before they actually begin to tiptoe and then ultimately just lean on you or find comfort in you?
To be honest, a lot of the dudes that came to me in that aspect, it was maybe a little easier for come to me because I wanted y'all. Like, I'm angry. I react a certain way. I ain't take disrespect a certain way, but I'm not heartless. I'm empathetic. I wear my heart on my sleeve. So for certain individuals who feel they got to lash out in a certain way because they know I'm a certain way too, it's a little easier for them to be more open with me than it be to somebody else who's playing the moral high ground of, oh man, holier than thou. Because I never come like that to nobody. I'm flawed as hell. I'm not perfect in the slightest. And a lot of these role models that we have down the negatives of their personality to try to present this perfect picture of who they are, not realizing that turns off a lot of people coming to you that are bearing their demons for the world to see.
You know, and I think that is something that has happened in my space. And once I realized it, I began to pivot. And the problem is, often those types of people are birthed because they're always the shoulder. They're always the listening ear. They're always the support system. So in many cases, especially like in the school system, if you don't come across as successful in what you're talking about, children don't want to listen.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have a car? I'm not listening to you. I get picked up in a car every day. You don't even have a car. Or you don't have money in the bank? Oh, I'm not listening to you. What kind of shoes you got on? Where you get them from? And it becomes very valuable listening techniques. So those, and not to defend that person, because there are some people who are malicious, but a lot of them have been the ear for way too long. So you often sometimes, and I've had to do this, you have to kind of, camouflage the stuff that may be going wrong in your life or problems, because then people won't come to you. And sometimes that they're not going to go to anybody else. But what happens is that person gets a glimpse, and the change happens for somebody like me when someone glimpses a glimpse into the background, what you're hiding, and realize, oh, you ain't got it all together. So now I have to bring you back down to my level. So now I'm fighting back. So now I start pretending at that point. I'm not just hiding, I'm pretending.
That's what
And that's what happens, I think, with a lot of role models. It becomes a lot to be that. And that's why most people don't want it, because now I have to govern my life. And the assumption is I have to be perfect in my life, because we typically listen to the Oprahs of the world. not realizing Oprah is just as broken as I am to this
Yeah.
day, with no matter how much money she has. And
I mean,
everybody just want to be saved. So,
if you have a kid, you go through a 1,000. Like if you're a present parent,
mm,
understand it, because like I got two boys and a daughter, and
mhm,
the huge thing is I can't tell y'all to do things I don't do. And the number one
mhm,
thing I always wanted to do the moment I made a decision to be a dad, to be real, was uh I just wanted them to just have as much emotional support as they could have, especially my boys. I mean, of course, I'm there for my daughter. You know, I'm like,
mhm,
I always wanted a little girl anyway. But like for my boys, the big thing was I never wanted them to feel like their emotions are like criminalized. Like when they're sad, when they're upset. There's a fine line between me telling you it's okay to feel this, but I don't need you to let this dictate how you move. If you're sad, I
mhm.
need you to process your sadness, and I need you to think about what you need to do. But be sad, shed your tears right now. It's all right. Because I know it's nothing wrong with telling somebody, all right, man, you could be sad, you could be emotional, but it's time to get to it. Like it's time to put your energy to something positive, work to what you need to do. But I can't tell you not to feel that. I can't tell you
Mhm.
that you feeling this is wrong when it's not wrong, because it's how you feel. And how you feel, there's nothing wrong with how you feel. It's how you
Were you
handle it.
given that? Were you given that space?
To be honest, not really.
Hmm.
Salute my actual father, of course. Like, when shit hit the fan for real, I think that was one of the only emotional anchors I had where like I could actually cry and not be judged for it. Or, even my stepdad when I was a little younger, um, I could feel angry, I could feel isolated, and I wasn't judged, I wasn't ostracized. But a lot of my family, to be honest, I was, on my mother's side, there was a lot of I was one of the few guys next to my other cousins. So we kind of were
Hmm.
like get over it. You'll be okay. And that made me angry. That made me really angry at when I was younger.
And that's
So
how often men translate sadness or frustration or depression. It comes out in anger or
yeah,
rage.
yeah, just rage, like bottled up, pent up aggression. But I can say that with my boys, I used to catch them having an anger problem, and a lot of times they just needed a hug. A lot of
Hmm.
times they wanted somebody to let them be sad, or they wanted comfort too. Or it's not just our little girls that need comfort, support, and affection and compassion. Our little boys need it just as much. They deserve it just as much. Kids deserve it just as much. Period. Children just
Hmm.
want someone to be there and make them feel safe and make them feel like somebody understands and listen. That shit right there for a child, period, is so important to their emotional health, because they're not going to be my age struggling with feeling like they have no one to listen to. I just don't want that. I wanted y'all to be 20 and y'all are worried about your life and y'all careers, not if people care about your anger. I should be there.
But
That's
now
why
you can see how an adult that's having trouble with communicating, or they go right to rage or right to like depression, or you see how that's birthed. And I want a lot of these coaches out here to understand that, or just the community at large. Like it really makes a difference when someone
yeah,
knows they have a safe space. And I've been in those types of relationships, and you'll have people say something like, well, don't go tell nobody, or you'll hear those trigger responses come from people when they're about to expose their heart to you. And it makes me sad, because that means somebody mishandled a relationship, whether it be romantic, whether it be friendship, whether it be somebody disrespected that boundary.
that's
And
sanctity.
now people don't feel like
Yeah.
they have a safe space. And especially for men, I can't eat a banana without you judging me. Like this
It's immediately getting
common
criticized.
stuff.
Like you can't dress a certain way. You can't
Hmm.
act a certain way. And a lot of that's taught as kids. But I'll never forget, like when I was younger, bro, like I had family members who I was into cartoons and shit. Like, what is this? Turn that shit off. Or stop this, stop that. Now, of course, you know, my sister and my father, they supported it, but like just the larger nucleus of my family, you know, they didn't support that shit, or I wasn't really into dressing a certain way. I didn't wear Jordans and stuff like that. Number one, it was too expensive. But number two, I didn't like dressing like other people. I like to do my
He
own
was an
shit.
old ass child. That's what
Yeah,
an old ass man.
Oh yeah, I was like, I don't like dressing like other people. That shit weird to me. Like, you know, when I see 5 people wearing cement threes, I'm on Reeboks. Like I just that's how I was, you know, but that was ostracizing. And a lot of kids are not taught to be individuals. We're taught to be idealized versions of their parents. And that in itself,
What's popular.
Yeah. And for Black boys, that's dangerous because a lot of my son's in the anime hard body. I was in the anime hard body. But I know the core difference was in his household, not only is he allowed to be in the anime, I'll watch it with him. I'll draw it with him. Me and my girl, we would watch it with him, draw it with him. They'll watch the shows, talk about it. He come to me, Dad, I watched Demon Slayer, and we'll talk about episodes. And I always told him, don't ever be afraid of what you're into. If someone judges you based on what you're into, they're not for you.
They're not for you.
But how many of us didn't hear that? I know I didn't hear that shit. I know I went to school, I was in the comic books. I was just called weird, and I was just ostracized by grown men and kids alike. It's just whatever, that he's into that weird shit. But now that it's popular, it's more socially acceptable. But how many kids grew up embittered, angry, and isolated? How many boys felt because they weren't atypical male interests that they're now othered just because of that? And that birthed a lot of these guys now who would be role models, who have an inherent bitterness towards their own community because they were ostracized and not fitting the mold. You got, again, the Kevin Samuels, the Fresh and Fit podcast. A lot of these guys were not considered the most desirable type of male archetype in our community. So in their anger, even when they reach success, it all gets directed back towards those people who ostracized them. When most of the time they learned it from their parents. They ain't know. Most of the people told you you're weird. They probably was into the shit too, but they were just taught that it wasn't cool.
I don't know if I was talking to you last week or I don't know who I was talking to. I just remember I wanted to be a singer so bad when I was younger. Like I loved like Luther Vandross and Whitney Houston to the point of like this exhaustion. And I remember if you don't show signs of like wow genius greatness, then people like I'm gonna wait till you get successful, then I'm gonna applaud you. And that's really what happened in my family because I had a lot of people who were creative. I always tell people I come from a very creative family that just their creativity was just dormant or they used it for a hustle.
Yeah,
you know, and a lot of the creative energy that I have, it comes from my family because I saw them doing things, but I never saw anybody go as far or as deep as I've gone in it. And I'm kind of like, you know, half of my family think I'm gonna be Tyler Perry, the other half just think I'm this weird artsy person, and they don't know how to really relate to me other than let me just buy a ticket to this event and applaud him, or just don't participate at all.
right.
But I remember saying like it's a moment where you understand who you are, but you still need acceptance. I don't care how old you are, to know that people love you despite anything, or really support you. It makes a difference, and we have to stop living our dreams because that my stepfather. I saw how he would encourage me. It was very unspoken. It was very indirect. At his funeral, I learned that he was in a quartet. And I was like, why didn't he ever share this with me? Or why didn't he ever? And I would hear him like the music was be on the radio and I'll hear him humming and I'll tune. And I think when he noticed me noticing him, he would stop. Because then that would ask questions and you got to reveal why you didn't do it. And we sitting at his funeral and his family is talking about his life, and I'm saying like he was a what? Like he never even showed any signs of it. It's like he packed that so far in that he just
He just
disappeared. And that's, I don't want to be that for anybody. Like I try to live for my family. And I'm learning how to do that in a healthy way now. But I want people to feel comfortable being who they are and doing what they love. And it's been hard. So I don't think I've been the best role model, but I will always, nobody can ever say I quit or I
right.
stopped. But that's my friend said that's what's gonna go on your tombstone. Who never gave up, and just trying. But that came from seeing so many people around me give up and live those dreams deferred. And just not even put that into their children. Just well, he gonna do this for a little bit, then just let it go. And it
Right.
just it especially for my stepfather, it makes me realize like I remember a time I was trying to play an instrument, and instruments cost a lot of money, so much so that they be trying to finance them, and we
Yeah.
could not get my mother could not afford the instrument, and he was trying to find everywhere in the world to get me this instrument. Now I didn't even play it very long, but it was just now I see him trying to encourage me in certain ways that he didn't see that happening. But in terms of how you now represent yourself as a role model, how do you take that job on? Not only being a parent, but I'm sure you may have nieces and nephews or younger cousins or just people you like you're on live. How do you take that role model job for yourself now?
I mean, the biggest thing is just being by example. Anything that I preach, I have to live by. That's how I've always carried it. If I like a lot of my homies, I try to tell them like how y'all treat women or how you
Mm-hmm.
talk and how you address people. Like I tell my homies all the time, like the biggest thing, like how you treat women is indicative of how you treat other people. Like, so if you treat women
Mm-hmm.
like trash, but you think, oh, what's up, after bro, you're gonna treat me like trash just the same way. The moment it doesn't benefit you, how you treat other
Mm-hmm.
people matters. Like how you treat everyone should be unilaterally with respect. There should not be a. But if I don't do that, if I don't live by that, I don't even feel comfortable telling you to do that because I know I'm lying. And
Mm-hmm.
especially with my boys, I just tell them things that I live by, like things that I live by based on empathy. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk to a little girl in school, and the little girl would look at him. I said, "Hey, man, I mean, if you like her, just be nice, talk to her respectfully. You know what I mean? And if she don't want to talk to you, cool, just keep her pushing. But if she does,
Right.
she does. Because a lot of boys don't even talk how to deal with rejection. But if I didn't know how to deal with rejection, how could I tell you about dealing with rejection?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
when I was growing up when I was talking to girls when I was in school, the big thing I used to throw them off is when they'd say no, and I'd be all right, that's respectful, and I'll just walk off. What? You you you're not mad? Like, nah, I'm not about to beat your ass because you told me no, shorty. That's your decision. That's fine. But how many dudes did that? How many dudes couldn't
Right.
take no? How many people weren't taught to take no? So a lot of
But you said the secret message right there. If I didn't know how to take rejection, how can I then teach my son how to take it? So a lot of us just was comfortable with, well, I don't know it. They gonna get it if they gonna either get it or they not gonna get it.
but
And I
I
think
can't.
that's what was replaced by a lot of mentorship.
Yeah, a lot of mentorship was like, oh man, well, shit, I had to learn it the hard way. But bro, you learned it. So instead of letting someone else struggle and make those mistakes that's gonna be in their mind every day that they regret, why don't you tell them? Why don't you tell them you don't got to do that? And if he decide to make that decision anyway, then that's their conscious decision to do so. But the effort, the handout, and that's me. Just even with drawing comic books and just everything else I do is like I like to just be the example that I want to see in other people. But if I'm not living in that, then what I'm saying means nothing. If I don't respect my household, if I'm cheating on my girl and doing her filthy, how can I tell y'all about honoring your relationship? about honoring your woman and being there. How can I tell my son to be an honorable man? I'm looking at my girl every day knowing I'm best with other women.
And I tell a lot of parents when I've had to deal with a parent, and you can see their attitude, and they're puzzled as to why their child is doing this, because they're giving them everything. They may be disciplining them, and I always say a child is watching you. They're not really listening because they don't have the experience to understand what you're saying to them. What they're doing is mimicking your behavior. So if
They're
you
watching.
talk to people like this, guess what they gonna come out in public and do? That's how they gonna talk to people. I learned how to cuss because the women in my family had slick tongues. They
Right.
knew how to cut you down. And that's how I began to relate to people. And I had a lot of what people would consider very feminine ways in terms of how I communicated with people. But that's who I learned communication from. You hide everything that makes you look bad. You defend yourself. You cut people down. When you think they playing you. And it has taken me my entire adult life to understand that's not healthy for me.
Right.
So much so I had to separate myself from individuals to clear it from my system and fast it out of my system. But again, we don't realize if it's not handled as children, it then will matriculate into adulthood. And it's not fair that we just throw people away. And I know some of their behaviors, the R. Kellys, the Cosbys of the world has gotten to an extreme, but that started up at a place and was taught and never corrected by anybody.
Yeah.
And success can often prolong growth because now you have people who have an investment in you succeeding. So let's hide this behavior, and I talk about it now. Whitney, one of my favorite people, Whitney Houston, went through a whole life. I'm not saying nobody ever stepped in, but now you have all these accounts, all these documentaries, all these movies about her life. And I'm wondering how many people really honestly put an effort into helping her get through this habit. But now you're willing to talk about it and defend yourself.
It's the same thing with R. Kelly happened. Everybody came out and said, "Oh, we watched them and we saw this and we saw that." No one pulled your man to the side. And I had a homeboy. I ain't gonna say his name. I ain't friends with him no more anyway. But I ain't gonna say his name. He used to mess with younger girls. And I remember one day I pulled him to the side 1,000. I said, "Bro, I ain't gonna lie to you, bro. I can't keep rocking with you when you doing this, bro. I can't, bro. Like this is getting weird. And you have bro, son had daughters that are 15 and 14. Girl, you talking to 17, 18, bro. And you in your mid-30s. Legal. Do as you please. Nasty. Regardless. Yeah. And I'm like telling the son, like, bro, you're talking to girls younger than me. And at the time, I was like 19, 20. It was just like, bro, and maybe it was weird to me because I'm 30 now and I look at a girl who's 19 like a chap to me. Like you're a child. Like I don't. You're a child. Like I want a grown ass woman. You feel me? Like I don't get that fascination. But at the same time, if I didn't say anything, if I didn't cut ties, and I still was around you enabling behavior, then when it blows up and hits the fan, it's people still around him who know he does this. Yeah. Who know he give it up like this. Still knowing this before I even hung with him. They knew this before I even found out. And still hang with him. Still kick it with him. The whole nine. I'm the only one that said something directly to him about it. So when it hits the fan and people air his ass out, because it's coming. I don't do that. I don't believe in that. Karma gonna bite you in the ass. It's gonna be a bunch of people acting like, "Oh man, I knew he was doing this. It was problematic." But you're doing shows with him. You're doing events with him. Knowing he like that. You was never gonna address it. You ain't had to air him out, but you ain't gonna address it. You ain't gonna pull me on my man. That's kind of nasty, bro. Like, hell wrong with you, bro? Like it's kind of
But
crazy.
we depending on what it is, we normalize it. One, if it happened to us, or I may share the same ideals, and I'm just not cool with saying it out loud. But not everybody that goes along is accepting it. It's just, what's the benefit of this relationship? And either I can ignore it, and shit, her family need to see a hot ass anyway. That this conversation makes me I actually had the young man who I think it's something savage, African Bombada. I was supposed to interview him, and I got to speak to him on the phone. And from that conversation, I was like, I'm good. Like, this was enough. I don't need to push this issue or this story out into a world unless he really wanted to push it. And it was a moment where he was like, I've told my story, I'm good. And I heard him say that in the conversation, and I was like, I'm not going to try to capitalize off of this. But I remember him saying, like, it was so many people who knew, who may have walked in on it, who, would come in the house after they had did it, and it was that stench in the air. And you just know this grown ass man in the house with these teenagers, and then come to find out it was other young men who spoke out after that. And it's just, we're very comfortable with seeing stuff like that. I can only imagine it's comfort because and I know this is uncomfortable to confront somebody about something, because what do you say? But you found the words.
I mean, I was a friend. I mean, it's not like I pulled him to the side, like, bro. It was funny enough because the girl I'm with now, that's the reason I try to set them up. Because she was like a little older, but she's the one, and it's crazy. She's the one that made me look at him crazy. Because I was young and guy doing shows and doing all that, but she was the one that's like, well, your man a dirtbag. I'm like, huh? Like, he chasing after bras that's close to my age. And mind you, this is behavior that I met his father before. His father was a womanizing ass motherfucker like that. So, like, this is behavior that was taught. You weren't fostered on the concept of, yo, just because she's legal doesn't mean she's a grown ass woman. Just because she's fast and coming on to you does not give you the excuse.
That becomes their excuse. That becomes their open door.
You weren't taught that. But see, I was taught that. Like, hey, that's a kid, little homie. Once you get a certain age, that's a no-no. And I was taught that just off the cuff. I wasn't taught that as like oh man, you messed up. Nah, like my stepdad told me that. Like, man, if you can't take Shorty out to the bar with you, you don't need to be talking to Shorty. And if she is, and the age gap between y'all is enough to where y'all kids are close to the same age, you need to ask yourself, where were you at to meet her in the first place? Like, certain things I was just always taught as a youngin' that I'm thankful for. That I had males who not only were healthy, but how many of the role models we have condone this behavior? You have dudes like Little Boosie who was saying they was paying prostitutes to sleep with the kids.
Yeah, but and not excusing it, but this is not a new thing.
No,
and because
no,
it's not a new thing, we've been groomed to overlook stuff or ignore stuff or not pay attention to stuff. Because if you go back to them great grandparents or grandparents' ages, you'll realize grandpa was grown and grandma wasn't, or vice versa, or some combination. And you see where a lot of this stuff then comes from. You talked about the Little Boosie issue. That's problematic for me. And thankfully I never had sometimes you'll have friends that kind of try to push you into situations, but I'm thankful that I never had that. Well, in actuality, it did happen. It just wasn't family. And it puts you in a space of, like, you don't know what to do. And you don't know, I had a situation where I was the same age as a young person, and a supervisor crossed the line.
Hold on.
And then, when you're in these types of environments, as you all out there listening, like, what are you okay with saying things? Are you okay with speaking up? Are you okay with telling the truth? I tell that story to people because I never talked about it literally until I was after 30, because I was embarrassed because I was a teenager. And I thought what everybody else would think, oh, you must have wanted it to happen then. You ain't say nothing. You ain't tell nobody, so you must have. But as black men, we're taught to keep those types of things, just erase it. It didn't happen.
As black men, we're taught as youngins that we're hypersexual anyway, so we're supposed to like it. We're not supposed to feel uncomfortable with dealing with someone. Like, I lost my virginity to a girl that was older than me by a few years. I was like 14, she was like 17 she was in high school, I was in middle school. And when I was younger, it was cool, but I felt weird. Like, anytime I saw her after that, it was hard to look at her. I don't know why. Like,
But we don't accept that coming from men. We only accept that if it's coming from a woman.
But I felt weird, bro. I'm not gonna hold you. I felt weird as hell. And I get older and realize I felt taken advantage of 1,000. Like, I was a willing participant, but I'm 14. I'm thinking, oh man, mess with an older woman, cool. But then I get older, like, why the fuck is he messing with my young ass?
And would you look at it that way if it was one of your children in that predicament?
If it was one of my children now, like if my son told me that, like if he's 14 and girl 17 trying to talk to him, yeah, I'm looking at it a little weird. Like, hey, why is she talking to you and not a boy older than her? That's 18, 19. You need to pay attention to that more so than why she trying to talk to you. Yeah. And if you 14, you need to be talking to a girl your age, around your age group. If she was 15, a year older, or if you're a year younger, like if it's still within a relative age group or y'all in the same class, it's fine. But when they're in a whole different ballpark, you're in middle school, they're in high school. But that
becomes normal. And I hate to keep saying it like it's okay, but we have to stop pretending like this behavior wasn't normalized in high school. Or then looking at your cousins, how many of them got picked up by older men after school and driven home? How many of them were teen parents who had boyfriends that were of age? I think, I remember telling the story of being, it was two situations where I felt like I was molested, and the other half, like I was kind of pressured into having this sex with my then supervisor and one of the coworkers. And I felt embarrassed. Like that was the part for me. I remember after the one with me, the girl and my supervisor, I remember me and him went back to our place of employment. And I was, in my mind, I was like, please don't let him say nothing. Because I remember him coming back talking about another young man who he did something like this with. And he joked him forever for not, because he didn't go through with it all the way. And I felt in my mind, one, I was being used because I became the excuse for him to be able to do this with her when he was like late 20s. And both of us was like 16. And I was sitting there like, I think he used me. And I was so embarrassed. And then what I did not want to happen, he talked about it. So then for months after that, really until I left that job, like a year and a half later, people still was talking about it. So I then got put in the category with him. And now I'm saying like, we don't understand. And that really stunted my sexual growth because I did not want to do it after that. Like it wasn't fun for me. Like that uncomfortable feeling you felt. I started to look at this girl in her face. And she was way more experienced than I was. But I felt like I just was used as a in-between to justify this grown-ass man sleeping with this little girl. And
Yeah.
I felt embarrassed, and I really felt like something was gonna happen. Because then we took that little girl home. We took that little girl home, and I remember her mother coming across the street, yelling and screaming, looking at him like this has happened before with them. But she looked in the back seat where I was sitting at, and I think it kind of confused her, like, oh, maybe he did just bring her home from work. But the fact that you came across the street like that means something had already happened. Or the
Right.
mother felt like something. And I was like, what if she say something or come up to the job and
Do some
now
wild
I'm put in a predator position and me and her the same damn age. But it's weird how we justify it and we build on top of it. And we tell that's what they supposed to do. I've
You
heard
said
people say, well, as long as he's not a weirdo, like out here being one like them perverts.
well, you said a mouthful right there that a lot of the time, like even with young boys, it's like we're not allowed to have certain emotions. We're
Yeah.
hypersexualized. So like older adults will play on the fact that what are you
Mm-hmm.
what this or something because you ain't doing this, huh? What you don't
Yeah.
like? You don't like girls or something? And they
Yeah.
use that to weaponize your nativity into
Mm-hmm.
them doing some shit they ain't supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember all the time you'd be pressured into talking to certain girls. This one thing that really messed me up when I was younger was I was called Captain Saberho a lot of the times. That was that was the name, right?
He was we used to call that person the reformer. You were the reformer.
I was the reformer. But I would put it like this. I remember I had a homegirl who was a friend. Dude was like, oh man, no, I'm trying to hit that, this, that, and third. And for me, I was always due to talk to somebody anyway. So when I talk to a girl, she could talk to me, I guess they'll feel comfortable. So do you know how many girls I used to talk to and they tell me how they were sexually assaulted?
And it would sound so normalized.
When I'm talking to them, a lot of the times it just felt weird to me for me to try to pursue some quickie with somebody who got comfortable with this because somebody in their family took advantage of them.
Mm-hmm.
It again, the empathetic part of me was just like, I'm not comfortable. I was never comfortable doing that because it's like, man, she probably needs an ear, not that. Like, she probably needs somebody who'll just hear this out and be like, damn, like,
I
hey,
think
shorty.
is your sound on? Like
I
it's
can
like
hear
a
you.
reverb or something.
No, it's fine on my end. Can you hear me
So
now?
I really get that, and I understand it because I remember talking to that young lady years later. I think we were probably grown in our 20s at that point. And I had pulled over and she was on a bus stop. And I offered to take her home. And I thought about it in that moment. And I wanted to apologize to her. So she didn't think I was trying to do that again. And she was like, man, if I had a dollar for every time that happened. And I was like, I ain't never did nothing like that before. So,
Right.
but it was the idea that was normalized for her.
That's crazy. And you legitimately were trying to say sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, I think she understood me and her were in the same boat at the time. And understood like we both were being taken advantage. I mean, this is what she was saying. Like we both were being taken advantage of. And how she dealt with it was she had dealt with that with men before. That's just how she dealt with things. But it's just a weird state to be in when you don't know those boundaries or you don't know those signs. And typically that happens to people who adults feel like aren't being watched and aren't being looked at.
And oftentimes, and just be 1,000 when it comes to black kids, we are abandoned a lot of the times. We are left to our own devices a lot of the times. We're told that we're grown the moment we start developing some sense of intelligence. little girls are called grown and being fast because they're learning in the environment that they're being raised in. And black boys, particularly, we are taught to objectify these people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's just crazy. Role models and being a role model for a lot of us is like climbing a mountain, because we're climbing a mountain of past traumas, uh, lessons from traumatized people, because we're just learning from other people who are traumatized, trying to form our own sense of what's right and wrong when other people may not even been taught what's right and wrong, the right or wrong way. Like it's traumatized people teaching people based in trauma, and the cycle is going to keep going until we start showing that we stop trying to fix broken adults and help kids. But broken adults need empathy as well. Like, no one needs to give up, because they could be a role model for a kid who's damaged, or for a little boy who's going through the motions, who's been assaulted, who's experienced violence. I don't know. A lot of these situations just come from like people not caring about black kids in general. Like they don't really be caring.
And I understand the lack of representation, but no matter whether it was good or bad, it was still representation. It was still a role model, good or bad.
Yeah.
And I don't think we put enough attention to one. People are watching us. Young people are watching us. And I know that's a lot of responsibility. Like, I don't have children, but that's a big responsibility that I have to be a role model for my nieces, for my younger cousins, and understanding that people are watching.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. I've had a couple family members come to me, and because of what I'm doing, it has given them the courage to kind of branch out and do something different than what we've seen growing up. You know, I've had that from students, and I would not have imagined somebody was watching, because I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard, especially in my 20s and my teens. I didn't feel seen. But to know that somebody was watching, somebody has been paying attention, it just may not have been hands-on. I just think we need to really revisit this role model slash mentorship, and really not be afraid to reach out and be one-on-one with a kid. I know it's scary. Because I think part of what happened was those one-on-one mentorships turned into group programs, because nobody wanted to be alone, because so many people have been dishonorable or mishandling children in inappropriate ways. So nobody wanted to be alone. But I think we have to go back to a place where we are monitoring those things, but sometimes children need one-on-one attention, and because they don't feel comfortable sharing things or telling things or to a group of people, or you in the after-school program. I don't feel like saying this in front of everybody. But I think we just really need to go back to that model again, or recreate it even.
I mean, I think I agree with that, man. To be 1,000, I think we need one-on-one mentorship for young boys, young girls as well. But like you said, oftentimes black boys don't have a lot of male role models that actually show a lot of compassion and empathy towards them, and the particular struggles that we go through as black men. And it starts as kids. It starts as that level of unconcern for your emotions that's not dealt with as children, and that leads to problems in adulthood. I think we need, I mean, the major thing is having role models that are actually.
Say that again. You said role models that are what?
I think we need legitimate role models in our community that who are legitimately like there. It's hard because we need trustworthy people to be in our children's lives, and like you said, a lot of us don't trust certain people with our kids, and rightfully so, because you don't know everybody's intentions. But there needs to be a balance. Like you can monitor somebody watching your youngins or monitor or being a mentor.
But you just said it. That person isn't there and should not be put in sole care of someone else. You should be there. You should be there when they pick the child up. You should be there when they drop the child off. You should go to the activities with them or, have a communication with them. I remembered, and this wasn't my situation because my mom was always there when Mr. Samuel would pick me up or drop me off. And she would always ask me what we did after, he would bring me home. So I saw, as an adult, I can see her now monitoring. But
Right.
don't just send your child to an after-school program. Pop up, show up, participate, because that person is there to help you, not replace you.
Exactly.
And often those inappropriate things happen when they realize, oh, I'm just going to put my child in your care. No, that's not what that person is there for.
That person there to be a mentor, not a parent. And a mentor,
Right.
you still need to be present. You still need to be there, and that's the major thing because it's safety. Because being real, I don't know these people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like my son said, I want to draw, learn boxing. I was like, hey man, we're gonna do it together. We're gonna be in the class together. We're gonna be learning the box together. Your dad gonna be right here. So son, I'm not gonna get in the way of him teaching you to box or teaching you to play football, but I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to be your father. And in case he get too extra, like I never forget they wanted him to play football because my son kind of big, big boy for his age. And he ain't like football. And, a lot of times we pressure black boys to do particular activities because we feel, oh, he's big, he should play football. But he likes to dress up as samurais and play Demon Slayer. Like he doesn't want to be a football player. He want to be a Power Ranger. So I'm like, what do I do? I'm not about to force him to do something to make me feel like my son's being more manly.
Right. We have to drop, and I know a lot of these words are overly used, but these overly antiquated positions that they assume that black men are supposed, if you're not a basketball player, then you're a football player or you're a coach. And then that's really it. Everything else is you being a provider and protector. Outside of that, but we have to begin to open our minds, just like we've allowed women to explore and be all that they could be. We have to give that same, because I still feel like we want men, we stop raising them to be, but we want men to simply be providers and protection. And you would think that would be gone by now, but
it's alive and well.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with us being providers and protectors, but I am more than just the person that's going to pay the bills and keep you out of harm's way. Yeah, and I've had that issue with friends, not just people I've been in relations with, but friends, feeling like that's my role. Like, no, that's not
all there is to me at all.
Yeah, I'm more than that. I don't mind I've been a mentor to a couple of my friends' children. I don't mind doing that. I love doing it because I love teaching, but I am not responsible for them in a way that you have made me responsible. Like I'm replacing a parent, it feels like. And I know sometimes that's really what's needed, but you got to figure out another way to do this because now you're putting your responsibilities on me when I should be an extension or an addition to who you are or who that other person is not doing. I shouldn't be the primary caregiver. And when we do that, we find ourselves in situations where people are being inappropriate. And I'm not saying that because all black men are inappropriate, but you find yourself maybe with the wrong person with your child and you've given that level of security clearance to someone that's going to probably do something that's not good because they see that you're not in the moment. So if you're taking them to go be a boxer, why can't you go and watch your child practice? Not every time, but make it so people don't slip up and,
they don't get too comfortable
do what's
thinking that
natural
you're
to
not
them.
there. Yeah, like, I'm big on that. Like before I take my kid anywhere, I need y'all to understand I might pop up like the boogeyman.
That's not the boogeyman. That's called parenting.
Yeah, like I pop up.
That's called parenting.
When they go to school, some parents like, oh, don't do this. Oh, your teacher said you're doing that. maybe I was biased. If my kid said the teacher was acting extra, I took my kid's side before anybody else till evidence was provided otherwise. Not like my kid can't lie or like my kid do that. Like my son went to school, said the teacher was talking to him crazy. And I remember when I was going to school, when I was telling my mom, the teacher talking to me crazy. She wouldn't believe me. She think I'm lying. I was like, no, I'm never doing that. When my kid tells me something in confidence, if I find out you lying is one thing, but the last thing I want to do is assume you're lying to me and you're telling the truth, and I missed some behavior that I didn't see. You feel what I'm saying? Like I'm
gonna say this, sir. As the teacher who has been often misunderstood and misinterpreted by students, I always tell parents, "Come up, let's have a conversation." You can see in that conversation what's happening, but don't take that child's word as law no more than you go or disbelieve that the teacher or the other person is correct.
at least
And I'm just speaking
investigate.
as a person that's been in the school system for a very long
No,
time.
don't get
I've had
confused.
plenty of parents come up there with their chests out.
I know kids a lie, so I'm not the guy gonna
Or they
come
just
in.
misunder. So in a lot of children homes today, like you still considered a younger parent. So in homes today, they're not getting disciplined the way we would have gotten disciplined. So they're not used to someone being stern with them. So they don't have a male figure in the home. So they're not used to a male telling them what to do and guiding them and disciplining them. So we have a lot of children, especially some of our women children, who come to little girls who come to school and they cry when Mr. Couser tell them have a seat and stop talking because
Right.
they're used to either a man in the house being abusive or being aggressive with them, so they don't know how to differentiate that. So I always tell parents, come to school and have a conversation. So in that moment, that child can see mom knows how to communicate. So this is how I communicate. Ask a question versus creating that soft child that is
Emotionally,
doctorized. All
yeah,
these
like they,
terminology, psychology, all these psychology terms. But it is balanced because a child often will misunderstand. One, they don't have the experience or the know-how to understand. Mr. Couser is being an extension of my parent right now. My dad or mom was being abusive. You know, in situations you can tell when a adult is lying or not telling the
right.
truth or trying to like skirt around issues. And I normally stand 10 toes down. That's what I said. That's how I said it. Would you have want me to say anything differently to your child or separate your child from how I'm communicating with the rest of my class? And then normally parents be like, oh, okay, because I thought.
That's the beauty, like you said, of the village mentality, because it used to be when we all care about the child, that's
Yeah.
the common denominator, that this is for the safety of the children. So if my
Mhm.
child acting out of line and you like, hey, I told you to sit down, you doing too much. And it is what it is. But then when I get to the classroom and I ask you what happened, yeah, man, the kid was doing the most this and third. I get to check my child right there. I don't gotta embarrass my
Mhm.
child. A lot of parents think embarrassing
Right.
your child is discipline. It's not. Like my
That creates tension between that child and the teacher now.
right. Where I remember my stepdad, he had this thing, he would go to the school and salute the wall. I always remember he came to school one day. He ain't gonna embarrass you. Teacher gets talking all that one. He just gonna shoot you that look. Oh, you got an extra in here today. Oh, okay. I'm gonna see you when I get home.
Mhm.
You don't got nothing to say. I ain't about to do all this with you. We gonna talk about it when I get home. Number one, you could have embarrassed me. Could have aired me out. Oh, whoop that. He ain't say none of that. I'll see you when I get home. Then when I get
Mm.
home, and like he yelling and hollering at me. He's like, what the hell is that shit about? Who you doing this shit?
Right.
Like, what you doing? Like, now that we're home, we gonna talk about it now. Because that was extra. I ain't gonna do you in front of the teacher and have you and the teacher make you look crazy in front of the teacher. Because that ain't the teacher's place to see how I discipline
Mhm.
you. This ain't a show for them.
Yeah.
Because some teachers, I've had some teachers who will be like, you know, my stepdad and them, they'll talk, great combo. But there's some teachers that didn't mind watching the kid be disciplined to get the gratification and them being punished. I'm not there for their gratification for that. We're going home so me and you can have that discussion. And like you
Right.
said, that creates tension with the teacher and the student, because now the student feels like you weaponize their
You
parent
got me
against
in
them.
trouble.
Yeah, when it's not about that. It's about, we want to check this behavior that you're doing that's problematic. Like, there's empathy. And I feel a good parent and a good teacher are one and the same in that respect, is that we care. The empathy's
Mhm.
there, and everybody's there for the benefit of the youth. But
Yeah.
you know, that's the common denominator of most of this, is empathy for the youth, is caring about the youth, is hearing them. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel that mitigates a lot of issues, you know, just for our youth, especially our boys.
Mm-hmm. And I think that needs to be carried over into how we communicate with each other as adults as well, because we assume once you cross 18 or 21, you good. And now that age is dropping. People are like, "Oh, you 14, you good. You're a teenager now, you good." And I
Yeah.
think we need to continue that new way of communicating, because this is not something that has been done before.
Right.
And I'm not saying all parents don't do it, but the majority don't. And as people, we don't. We don't communicate with our siblings that way. We don't communicate with our friends that way anymore. Our coworkers, somebody on the street now, like we're ready to go off. And I
Right.
remember being that person going into my adulthood, just because I went to white schools. I had to always be on the defense. You know, I was the only boy in my family. I had to go toe to toe with some real strong-willed women, and cousins and such. But I had to turn that around, and I had to learn how to communicate with people in a way that it wasn't always I'm defending myself. And sometimes just saying how you feel, people will still play you. They still will play you, but then let me get this person out of my space. Let me remove myself from this environment. And it really does make a difference. So as we kind of close out our conversation for today, what are your last thoughts on, the importance of role models and mentorship, or any solutions that you may see that we can, utilize or address?
Um, I feel role models, especially for our young boys, is super important.
Mm-hmm.
It's paramount that we have better representation of just not a particular type of black male, but just a healthy-minded black man that is
Mm-hmm.
empathetic to the youth, and understanding of certain nuances of what's damaging to our emotional growth and to our, just our mental growth in general. And we just need better representation of just normal black men who are emotionally and mentally sound, and have a sense
Mm-hmm.
of empathy and compassion, regardless of their success or whether they're rich or famous. That can no longer be the 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 basis of what we consider success for a black man anymore. Because obviously, people have money and are still emotionally damaged. Mentally, they're still stuck in their teenage years, in their 30s, because they didn't address certain traumas. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel for us as a solution, the major thing is for those on the ground level with our youth to be more active in our community, just be more active in certain things, and use our talents as that vessel. Like you have your podcast, and you have the exchange, the artist exchange. And it's easy to reach out to youth and reach out to brothers you see doing things in the community, like you've been doing. Like you reached out to me, and
Mm-hmm.
you reach out to someone younger who's doing something, and that may get someone who's a little younger to be like, hey, okay, someone younger thinks like this, and I'm not crazy, and I can say certain things of that. Those little steps forward does a lot for our youth who are watching us, because they're watching us.
Mm. Yep.
Like I said, they're watching us. So,
They
but
hear less and they watch more, and that
mhm.
really sets the standard. And that moves us into next week. Who set your sexual value? And we got into it a little bit today, but who set your sexual value? who determined the man or woman or them, they, him, she, her? Who determined that value that you have? And the term value meaning value, your belief, your feeling on what you believe in, or not just the act of sex, but how do you see yourself as a man, as a woman, as trans, as non-binary?
Right.
Who set that value for you? Was it set for you, or
That's gonna
have
be
you taken control of it at this point?
That's definitely gonna be a combo. We gotta chop
Right.
that paper. I'm gonna save my answer for
Okay.
next Friday.
Let people know where they can find you at. Your IG is up there. Is that your podcast, Nerd Rap Podcast, is up
Yeah.
there.
Nerd Rap Podcast on Anchor.fm, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anything that has podcasts, you can find Nerd Rap Podcast. Mainly audio based. I do lives on Facebook, but the major thing is audio for me. So,
do you have a page set up just for that, or it's just you use your personal page?
I just use my personal page on Facebook for it. Yeah.
Okay.
And most episodes I have the link to Anchor, so you can go to the Anchor app and it'll take you to everything from Spotify.
So that's been another show. It's been great having this conversation with you. It's almost like I do another show midweek, but I really look forward to this conversation because I don't have the restraints of doing my show and being under my brand. It really just good conversation and solutions. I want people, as you listen to this, I know a lot more people normally listen on the replay of it. If you see this in the conversation, if you want us to, if you want to join us in on the conversation, please let us know. I'll be I'm gonna definitely put the message out there a lot sooner this week, so it should be going out about tonight. But next week is Who Set Your Sexual Value. Thank you for tuning in. Please follow this gentleman on all digital platforms, Nerd Rap Podcast. You can also find, and I share a lot of his stuff on my page, so you can see that live when it goes live on Facebook as well. So please stay tuned, stay locked in. Tomorrow on the Artist Exchange Media Hub platform, we have IMC Podcast at 11. I think it's going to be about 11:30 tomorrow. We might get a later start tomorrow. So stay tuned in, stay locked in. Only great things to come. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and we'll be putting our things up. Our website is almost finished, and we'll be putting our stuff up on digital platforms too. But you can go to YouTube and find all of our shows on that platform. So peace out, people. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. I hope the weather doesn't get too bad. So just be careful out there. It's March. Anything can happen.
Right.
Peace out, people.
Peace.
Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
Artist Exchange Live.
The Artist Exchange. The Artist Exchange.
The Artist Exchange.
Start